Okay, so previously we talked about keeping yourself healthy. We talked about backup resources and your citation management resources. Let's move on to what actually happens when you start sitting down to do searches and you start getting articles back. Okay, so this is all before you even start writing. All right. Let me show you what I tend to use. So basically, I am sitting there at my computer. I've got a database open, Eric, ProQuest. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them. All right. Oxford journals. There's a bunch. So what I've got is I've got an active document, and all of these next few documents, they're all active. They're all live. They're all kind of organic and evolving. All right. I basically have a search terms document that I constantly am adding to. Okay. And when I'm done with this one, I'm going to start another one, or I'm going to flip it over and keep on going. Okay. Your search terms evolve. The more, as you work through the literature, you find little threads of ideas you want to follow, okay? And you need to determine your search terms. So, look, if you're if you're lucky and you get the jackpot, you come up with your search terms in your own mind and you type them in and you get all the articles you read. And then there's real life, which is that as you read, you discover search terms. All right? So you need to note those things down. Obviously, the first thing on this paper are going to be search terms I start out with that I thought, is what phenomena is called by me. And then I come to realize that other authors call the same phenomena by different names. So you need to learn. You're going to learn through experience what those different names are for the different phenomena you're trying to document. All right. Authors use different names, and then there's another thing that happens, which is you have different authors using the same term, but it actually means different things. Okay, you need some kind of way of noting that down. All right. Resiliency. We talked about kind of mental habits a little earlier. Resiliency is really important here. Look, learning the search terms on any given search, it's a learning process every time you do it. I mean, sure, you do get a little better at it each time, but the core skill you have is resiliency. Getting used to not finding something and randomly, in some cases, or in some kind of principled manner, following small threads, following the small stream until you get to the big river, kind of thing. All right. It takes time. You could spend an entire day searching for stuff and not hit home, and that's just the way it goes. Okay. But the way you can get better terms is to read more, and you mine the literature for new search terms. You add them to the list. Okay. It's an active, living document that changes over time. So the second thing is that when you start getting research down, you start establishing a reading list of things that you're going to read. My recommendation at the very start is you can keep a reading list somewhere, but I would say I don't tend to put pen to paper until my eyes have actually hit that paper and I've started reading it. Okay, so I don't just blindly record citations from my search terms. Okay, I actually whittle it down to a stack of papers that I'm going to work through. Okay, and those stack of papers may be more or less useful for my purposes. But what's important is that if that stack of that particular paper is going to be of any vague use, if I've determined for some reason that it's useful and relevant to me in some way, I note down the citation. All right. I get the last name of the author, first name. I get the year down, and I get the title down. Okay. Then the other thing I note down very quickly, and you can find this out from the abstract, is maybe what research question that article is going to do, because at some point you're going to need to jog your memory about what the article was about, and so having it down in a few words is just a great way of jogging your memory, right? If it is not an empirical paper, there isn't necessarily a research question. Okay, it might be a review of some kind or some commentary, and you need to just kind of make a note of the general topic, if you will. All right. Then over here, this is actually kind of a hodgepodge of a lot of different stuff. It's the keywords, the phrases, and issues. Right, and this potentially could be very full. I could fill this up with just one article sometimes, and other times, I've read 3 articles and I might get just like three entries. But the point is that you are collecting, key findings that might be key for the study. You might be finding tangential findings. Tangential for the study, but key for you. Okay. You will also be finding collections of issues, themes, if you will. And so this is where I kind of home in on like keywords, right? You find those keywords. The keywords that you might enter here end up on your search term list for something later. But also, one of the things we do in a literature review is we need to find out what the issues are. What are the issues for that line of inquiry, for that field? All right. For example, broadly I studied linguistics, specifically applied linguistics, second language acquisition, and in particular I was looking at usage-based theories. Okay, and so I'm interested in like what do usage-based theorists tend to be interested in. What are their main concerns? So you establish the list of main concerns that all usage-based theorists have, right? And you find little clusters, if you will, of terminology. You want to pay attention to the terminology that across usage-based theorists, or in my case, but across authors and researchers operating within that domain, what are their common building blocks of ideas? Okay, so that's the key terms and key concepts that are used by multiple authors operating within a particular domain. All right, because that's basically a field-wide or a domain-wide, either accepted ideas or areas of consideration or areas of inquiry, right? And ultimately, that's what you want to figure out. Is you want to figure out what are the accepted ideas, what are the commonalities that all of the usage-based theorists believe in, or all linguists believe in. Then what are the little zones of inquiry within that? So some usage-based people are looking, in my case, they were looking at language environment factors, and other usage-based people were looking at, they were concentrating more of their energies on the cognitive stuff, okay? While all were relevant, nobody can cover all the bases, and so you sort of find these like little puddles of terminology and inquiry, and you want to note those down. All right, because those terms are what end up not cool. Because those terms and those ideas are what are going to end up in your literature review. Okay, you're going to be citing, keywords or key phrases, right? And don't think just words. Do think in terms of phrases as well, or clusters of words, right? You're going to be citing them, and then you're going to be actually, citing the author and the study, or the author and the original document that you might have pulled them from, to show that these are common areas of interest. All right. So, and then the final column. Sorry, the final column is, I call it ES or CR. So the ES stands for empirical study. All right. In some way, you want to notate whether this thing that you've just read and extracted information from is is it primary research? Okay. Did somebody go out and measure something and come back with data? Right. And then we have the CR, which will stand for commentary and review. It's kind of like secondary research in a way. That is to say that it's, maybe a single author went out and looked at all the empirical studies, the primary research, and decided to summarize findings and extend an argument. Okay, so they've gone and looked at the primary research, and they are sharing their argumentation based on that. And what you're reading is their interpretation. All right, that's really important because you need to have a grip on the primary versus the secondary research. Okay, because at certain points during your writing process, you need to be pretty clear on whether the state of that knowledge. All right, the third thing I've got here is another handy dandy graphic organizer. I call it the zones of relevance. All right, so you got these two columns here. Okay, ultimately these two columns in the middle, they kind of work their way into this. Okay, so zones of relevance is just a way of clustering ideas. What you want to do in some way is you want to note down like what are the points of focus. An easy one would be if you have a particular research question and you know what you're trying to find, all right, that'll or you have a particular finding that you care about, that goes there. Okay, and then in the outer circles you're starting to cluster keywords and themes that are relevant to that. Okay, and then the further out you get, it's the authors that you read tend to pose them as either primary issues or secondary issues out here. Okay, you want to get a sense of how ideas cluster, which ideas are more relevant to one another and less relevant to one another. Now, what I will say is that for literature review, you are actually going to have multiples of these going at any given time. Okay. Because in a literature review, the purpose of a literature review is very much to survey, broadly what the predominant issues are of the field. So you're going to have the version number one of the paper number one of this, or copy number one of this is going to have one set of issues. Copy number two is going to have a different set of issues. All right. And then you might actually end up having a third version of this, where your area of interest is in the center, and in the next ring of relevance is the first two copies of this paper that the bullseyes from your first two copies, bullseyes of your first two copies of where you've done some research, are kind of here. All right. In relation to what you're interested in. Okay, so you don't just use this for what you're interested in. You use this as a way of noting down what the field is interested in, and there are going to be multiple areas of focus that your field is going to have. And as part of the literature review, you need to identify these centers of interest first before you zoom in on your center of interest.